Chapter 4. The New Energy. I'll begin this chapter on the new energy with an expanded look at a few key points I have discussed so far. Attention. First, and perhaps the single most important thing to understand about the manifestation of all experience is that what you give your attention to expands and becomes your experience, and with the repetition of that experience, it soon becomes your identity, who you believe you are. I cannot overemphasize the importance of attention. Casual thoughts in a certain direction do not produce anything but momentary results, but consistent attention on anything brings it into your experience, and in the faster frequencies of the new energy, it can often be so fast it seems like a miracle. For example, while driving your car with a friend, you discuss a place you'd like to visit, say the Grand Canyon. Moments later, you drive around a corner only to see a billboard advertisement suggesting you take a trip to the Grand Canyon. You turn on the radio and immediately hear lyrics in a song mention the Grand Canyon. Then you stop at a gas station and get out to fill your tank, and someone standing beside you at the next pump has a jacket on with a patch on it from the Grand Canyon. This sort of thing can happen in a matter of minutes. If you continue to give your attention to the Grand Canyon, reference after reference will be given to you until you find yourself finally, sooner or later, somehow at the Grand Canyon. If you apply this same thing to a belief system such as, "I'm not attractive to the opposite sex," you may expect to find yourself very soon fixating every moment on a multitude of things that make you believe that you're inadequate for any relationship, lamenting about how you're too fat or too thin, too tall, too short, your nose is too big or too flat, you have the wrong body type, your hair is wrong, the color's wrong, or it's the wrong style, you talk too much or you don't talk enough, you say stupid things when you do talk, and triggering a long list of other feelings related to your unworthiness. Believing you are not attractive to the opposite sex soon becomes part of who you believe you are, and the world around you will reflect this belief everywhere. On television shows you casually turn on at just the right moment to tell you how attractive you will be to the opposite sex if you use their products, through friends and relatives who tell you that you're too shy or too introverted, through internet ads and magazines that offer endless suggestions to so-called backward, unattractive, lonely people to find the right mate that will make their life complete. The truth is, the people they attract will be perfect mirrors to show them exactly what they believe about themselves, and the agony of that belief system will grow even more painful until they finally choose to look into who they really are. Attention is the starting point, and unless you're consciously aware of where you place your attention before you realize it, if you realize it, you've added more and more conditioning to your false self's identity. One identity only. A personal identity separates you from real freedom. You have only one identity. You are one as, not one with all that is, or God, and your freedom is here now. The only reason you're not experiencing freedom now, if you are not, is because your attention is on who you are not. It doesn't matter if you know this to be true. If you do, what matters is where you place your attention in each moment. If you place your attention on working on yourself to someday become free, then you're giving your attention to the belief that you are not free now. And so that belief stays alive as your experience and continues to push your awareness of your freedom out into the future. You could be meditating and doing yoga for hours each day, eating a vegan diet, chanting mantras, burning candles and incense, listening to spiritual music tuned to the frequency of your heart, and attending endless workshops and retreats. If you place your freedom out in the future as something you feel you are working on or struggling to achieve, no matter how dedicated you are giving your attention to the belief that you are not free now, and that experience will expand forever until you shift it toward the truth. And a quote from Eckhart Tolle, "To awaken within the dream is our purpose now. When we're awake within the dream, the ego or false self-created earth drama comes to an end, and more benign and wondrous dreams arise. This is the new earth. You are free now. The declaration that you are free now, and your full attention on this truth, brings your awareness back to this truth, and it becomes your now moment experience. I've found the simplest way to declare who you are is to say, I am that I am. I mentioned before that this was a name for God given to Moses thousands of years ago on Mount Sinai. Or you could just say, I am. I prefer the longer version. You may have another way to say it, but it must be a present moment declaration to expand its truth into your now moment experience. The false self loves things to be complicated, and in keeping with its belief in unworthiness, believes that discovering who you really are must be difficult and hard work if you're ever to achieve it. The reality is, as A Course in Miracles puts it so well, the ego or false self likes to keep you mildly miserable. This is so you won't be so uncomfortable that you decide to do something about it, right now. The reason is simple, and it lies at the bottom of the false self's delay tactics for putting real freedom off as long as possible. When the false self is discovered to be unreal, it means its own death. An illusion cannot, of course, really die, but while you believe it is real and identify with it, the fear of its death is like walking on fire. This is why we call placing your attention on real freedom standing in the fire of self-discovery. It's also known as satsang. As Muji says, this fire will not burn you, it'll only burn what you are not. For me, the breaking point came when I was so miserable that I was willing to give up everything to be free. As it turned out, that was not the hottest fire I was to endure, not by a long shot. Giving up things can be really difficult, especially if you have a lot of them. But giving up cherished beliefs is much more difficult. At least it was for me. The breaking point has to be so intolerable that you're willing to say no matter what, and stick to that. Otherwise, when the heat is turned up, you'll turn back. No matter what. I spoke a little about my material wealth that evaporated soon after I jumped off the cliff into self-discovery, but also said I would explain what no matter what turned out to be for me. Soon after I made the big jump, I connected with a spiritually oriented woman who lived over 1,000 miles away in the USA. You guessed it, we met on the internet. I invited her to move together with me into my country home that I owned in Canada at the time, and she agreed. This was at first a very refreshing experience, since in the world I had just left, I had absolutely no one to really talk with about my great passion to find out who I really am. I had no idea that when the no matter what commitment is made from the heart, Source energy or God has a sort of free hand to begin revealing every block in the form of your conditioning that you've placed in front of who you really are. Kali Ma. Source provides you with opportunity after opportunity to look at your conditioning so that you can move towards transformation of it, a state of being empty. When you become truly empty, what is real floods in and you become aware of who you really are, God. However, in those first few authentic no matter what days of freedom searching, I didn't know about that. I only knew I wanted to be free. As a result, the opportunities didn't look like or feel like opportunities. They looked like a trip down a long, dark tunnel into hell. I had no idea that I had just invited Kali Ma, the ego slayer, to live with me, and so I didn't become consciously aware of the gifts it brought me until much later. I'll explain how the relationship acted as a giant house of mirrors for me in the chapter on the language of the self. The new energy is not the new age. The new age can be summed up as a precursor to the new energy, a sort of primer to tenderize the long-standing, tough, and rigid consciousness of the imbalanced masculine patriarchy that has controlled humanity for thousands of years. It helped to speed up consciousness to gradually acclimatize it to a much higher frequency than it had experienced for millenniums. Radical departure from socially accepted behavior is one way to describe the beginning of this New Age harbinger of the new energy. Women's rights, beatniks, and hippies, together with radical art, music, and dance, to name just a few, shook up the status quo. Global influences that began shifting this inflexible masculine consciousness began in the late 1800s as the age of Aquarius began to interface the fading age of Pisces. This air sign influence brought with it air-influenced discoveries, such as the telegraph, the telephone, the television, the radio and phonograph, and the film industry, the airplane, and eventually the internet and cell phones, which all worked in the unseen and dramatically influenced the frequency with which humanity experienced life as consciousness experienced a major speed-up. The powerful balancing influence of the divine feminine energy also began to show up, in part, through efforts by radical women. As the 20th century unfolded, it made far-reaching changes not just in obtaining the vote, but also in the powerfully influential industries of fashion and cosmetics, as well as for women in the workplace, in politics, including leadership of some countries, to women novelists, no longer afraid to use their real non-male name, not the least of which is J.K. Rowling's, with her enormous influence on the expansion of consciousness through the fostering of the belief in magic, which brings out the child in everyone. Jesus said, "Unless you become like a little child, you will not become aware of the kingdom of heaven," which is self-awareness. Major speed up. The consciousness of the third and fourth dimensions of time and space is very slow, and attention on manifesting our experience has taken years to be realized in most cases. But now, as the influence of the fifth dimension, or now, is quickly and powerfully making itself felt everywhere, there's been a ramp-up of the speed with which life experience seems and feels. Transportation moved from horse and buggy to automobiles, to high-speed trains and jet travel, and altered our lives in a multitude of ways. What took weeks and months and decades to accomplish in the past has been reduced to minutes and hours, allowing life to speed up exponentially and offer many, many more options in every walk of life. But what is most important and has been occurring with consciousness beneath the radar is a huge speed up from the slow third and fourth dimensional reality to the far higher frequency of the fifth dimension. This seems to contradict the stillness and peace that often defines now-moment consciousness. And yet what occurs when you speed up consciousness is the loss of contrast, and this must be present for manifestation or physical reality to appear in your experience. The third and fourth dimensions of time and space seem to separate one thing from the next, providing it with endless contrasts to taste, and endless roller coaster opportunities for drama. In itself, this is exactly what you, as God, designed for yourself when you created the universe. It is the identification with these things and dramas that stirred up the caca. Still, it was not a mistake. This doesn't mean that when you live consciously in the fifth dimension of now, that you no longer live in the world of things. It means you become multidimensional and experience the stillness and peace of the now-moment awareness, but at the same moment experience the 3D world you once believed to be real. In other words, you live in the world, but no longer of the world. It means you no longer see yourself as your identity, a victim of circumstances. You become aware that you are the self while still being able to function in the illusion of separation without its stranglehold. This is real freedom. And as a result, you get to play in the game you, as God, designed and created to know yourself, without the fear associated with identities, attachments, and expectation outcomes. But you cannot simply say that you're living in the now moment. That's intellectual Hollywood spirituality. You must discover who you really are, the self, God, before the now moment becomes your normal way of experiencing life. Symptoms of the new energy. When you experience speed-ups, you can feel very strange. If you've ever been on a roller coaster, you know exactly what I mean. The heart starts pumping faster and faster. There's a feeling of exhilaration mixed with fear, even terror, and you may have laughed and cried at the same time, even screamed, as a host of feelings flowed through you at once. When the ride was over, you may have quickly jumped out of the vehicle when it stopped, only to have a powerful urge to have another go at it right away. The speed-up of consciousness is like that, and brings on many changes that can be felt in a tangible and even confusing way if you don't know what's going on. Here's a list of a few symptoms you may have experienced in the last few years as the influence of the fifth dimensional shift expanded throughout the planet. You don't seem to care about anything much anymore. You no longer have the desire or need to make things happen. You have trouble relating to mental and analytical processes. You relate better to feelings. You care less and less about what people think of you. The concept of right and wrong seems to be fading. Relationships no longer provide the security, support, and safety that they once did. You crave simplicity. You experienced increased synchronicities. You seem to savor life more. You have a huge desire to be creative. You begin to pick up the feelings of others easily. You find yourself laughing for no reason. Things you think of begin happening almost immediately. Your physical body is going through all kinds of changes. For example, frequent bouts of dizziness, sleeplessness, or the need for long periods of sleep. You have hot flashes no matter what your sex or age. You frequently get the jitters. You lose your coordination now and then. You have frequent episodes of fatigue and spaciness. You get unusual aches and pains that come and go. And in the area of the mind, you have vivid dreams, loss of memory, panic attacks, random feelings of peacefulness, periodic difficulties reading or speaking, time distortions that make you feel like time is speeding up, and you have the desire to play, and many, many more. It was many of these symptoms and others that I had increasingly experienced since 1987 that brought me personally to the edge of the cliff ready to jump off in 1999. These symptoms are examples of being rewired. Imagine that every cell in your body, right down to the DNA, is like the wiring in your home. If power surges through the wiring in your home and it exceeds its capacity, a circuit breaker or fuse will blow to prevent a fire from breaking out wherever the surge occurred. You know that your body is taking care of many thousands of activities such as digestion, metabolization, detoxification, assimilation, elimination of cells and the growth of new ones, and that you don't have to think about any of these vital activities, nor are you usually aware of them other than perhaps a growl from your stomach now and then, or the urge to go to the bathroom. The body has its own consciousness and knows its function, and it'll take care of itself perfectly if it's allowed to. As these higher and higher frequencies of light or information or higher awareness influence your consciousness, the wiring of the body must adapt in order to flow with them and not burn out. This is the simple reason for the many symptoms that you're feeling. What you may expect in the new energy. Remember I said when you live in the now moment, while in a body, you will be multidimensional. This means you will still experience the third and fourth dimensions of time and space with all its contrasts and dramas, but you'll no longer identify the experiences in them with who you really are. You'll be a witness in the audience of a movie called your life, tethered to the actor you are playing in the movie, but no longer controlled by its identity, attachments, or expectation outcomes. You'll be free, and yet able to play in the field of dreams that you once called reality in a consciously aware state of freedom. It's possible that this experience may occur the very first time you go through an episode of self-discovery and remain with you from then on. This is spontaneous freedom. What determines this is your choice to be really free now. Phenomena. Most people have had what's called an aha moment, also known as satori, epiphany, or revelation. It's a moment when everything is totally clear. It could be as simple and specific as where you left your lost keys, and in a flash you know exactly where they are. Or it could be a grand awakening, where you glimpse who you really are in all your beauty and grandeur, peace and freedom. You just know that you are love, you are abundance, you are joy. The depth and expansiveness of the experience depends on how expanded your awareness is in the moment. It's important to note, however, that anything that comes and goes is not who you really are. In the case of this kind of experience, it can be a tiny hole in the wall through which you get a glimpse of who you really are. I'm not in any way pointing to phenomena as a way to freedom. If an experience such as this comes spontaneously, then just say yes to it and be open to its meaning, but do not seek it out. All phenomena is temporary, and as an aspect of the illusion that the false self lives within. Over the last few decades, we have heard more and more reports of near-death experiences, or NEDs, perhaps none more dramatic and poignant than Rita Morani's. And she says, "The amount of love I felt was overwhelming, and from this perspective, I knew how powerful I am, and saw the amazing possibilities we as humans are capable of achieving during a physical life." Most NED experiences are no different than an aha moment, except that they occur usually when medical science says the body is clinically dead. Somehow the person returns from the dead and reports what they've experienced, often with their life totally changed. The aha experience can have the same effect, and a moment of true self-discovery is one of those bliss-filled moments. You just know who you really are, and this flash of truth remains with you forever afterward. For some, however, the conditioning of the false self draws them back into semi-sleep, and they continue to believe that genuine freedom is somewhere in the future. For others, like Rita Morani, The awareness of who she is stayed with her, and she has gone on to share it with millions of people around the world, humbly standing in the full authority of the awakened God that she is. I was stubborn. In my case, I had reached a breakthrough point where I could no longer live the life I was experiencing. I'd achieved what most people call success, and I was immersed in the lifestyle that came with it, but not feeling the joy and peace and freedom I'd expected would be there. Nor did I recognize anyone in that world experiencing anything different from me, except in the degree to which they so-called succeeded. It was that deep frustration and constant longing to be free that, after many glimpses of self-discovery, finally took me into the audience watching the movie of my life as a witness from the awareness of freedom. It did not happen after the first or second or third time I experienced these glimpses of who I really am. It took 5 more years after the departure from my 10-year Kalima marriage to finally say yes to everything. You could say my false self was very, very stubborn. Today, the powerful influence of the much faster 5th dimension has reached its breaking point where my kind of stubbornness results in enormous suffering. When you've had a snapshot of the truth and still resist falling into it, your life becomes a nightmare of inner conflict. For those aware of this influence, these lives are filled with high anxiety as they witness the formerly solid structures of society coming apart at the seams. From business to finance to politics to education to the military to entertainment to religion, some systems of which have existed for hundreds of years, the cement of the imbalanced masculine patriarchy that has controlled this planet and humanity for thousands of years is crumbling. And this is as it should be. What has been full must be empty before the light of truth can fill the hearts and minds and bodies of humanity. As Charles Dickens said in A Tale of Two Cities, it was the best of times and it was the worst of times. The old energy and all its structures and belief systems are falling apart, while the new energy, light of truth, love, peace, freedom, abundance, and beauty, is rapidly expanding everywhere. Interface period. Humanity is in the interface period between the old energy and the new energy. It's literally the first few years of the golden age that has been prophesied. And it's a challenging period where everything from the old must be released to allow for the new to come into your experience. Depending on one's level of awareness, this can be a relatively smooth period. You are still in the fire, but with an asbestos suit called surrender, saying yes to everything that is, every experience. But for those who are completely unaware of the shift that's happening, it can be a living hell. Literally, billions of people are in the latter category, and wherever we can extend compassion for these ones, we should. Not because we are somehow better or more advanced than they are, but because we are one with and as them. It's a form of loving ourselves. The only seeming difference between us is the level of awareness we have in the moment, of the truth that we are God. And still, for most people, even this awareness is an intellectual belief in the mind, and not an actual living experience in the heart-feeling nature. Many deny this, saying they are free, but their lives are evidence of this, and it's not true. The mirrors in their life attest to it. Everyone must reach a point where they're ready to be transparent, authentic, and vulnerable, so that the truth can burn away all that is not true and replace it with the self. This requires the no-matter-what commitment I have mentioned before. Without it, when the fire gets too hot, they will simply turn back to the dream of separation and limitation, even though they may continue to speak about being free. For those ones, there is a tendency to cling to the old energy, the belief that freedom takes long years of practice and discipline and sacrifice before qualification for liberation is attained. They may even defend this belief vehemently. They may claim that spontaneous awakening to true freedom is very, very rare, and not to hope for it without much hard work and dedication. This is not true. Your freedom is at hand now, and requires only that you look directly in the face of the false self and say, "No more. I say yes to freedom now. I am that I am." This will bring up everything that is not true, and you will, I promise you, experience miracles of transformation. And a quote from Bhagavan: "Until you know who you are, all your knowledge is only learned ignorance."